this afternoon, joint meeting with the Appropriations and Financial Affairs and Health and Human Services Committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Subject matter today, Riverview Psychiatric Hospital, and a proposal that each member here has in front of them. Before we get into introductions, I'm just addressing the committee members here. I'm going to do my very best to make sure that, number one, I get your names correct. We got a couple of new folks to the legislature. We got new folks to appropriations, and those of you that are fresh to the legislature, here you go. Joint meetings. We won't meet again. And also, my advice to you, we are going to have a period where questions will be sought. And you have a question that gets directed through me. And I would appreciate you making sure that I do my very best to scan the room as we work. And make sure that I recognize or see that you have a question. And that way, that way I'm not leaving anybody out. Okay, try it. Those who are familiar with the way I've operated in here for the past 2 years, you know that I've tried to operate as fair as possible to all committee members, regardless of parties. I try to be as fair as possible and run this thing as efficiently as possible. So, just make sure that we make contact, all right? Also, for everybody else involved, I'm planning to go in 3 different parts here today. We have with us today Dan Waltham, Courtmaster for Riverview, and he will have the opportunity to address us and give us information. And also, after that is, I want you all to have the opportunity to pose questions to the Courtmaster. After that, we'll go to public comment. And those of you who are planning to speak, if you haven't seen Mary Ann, our clerk over here, she's got a sign-up sheet for speaking. And those of you that are planning to do so, I ask for you to be concise. Don't plan on coming to the microphone for 20 minutes, please. Because I really don't. Mary Ann, how many we've got so far?
6.
Just 6?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that takes a lot of pressure off. If I'm looking at all the faces out here, and I'm concerned that everybody wants to speak for 20 minutes, and that's going to be difficult. So, but there again, I just ask for you to be concise. And then after public comment, committee members, both committees, will have the opportunity to pose questions that we don't have the answers to today. And our committee analyst over here, Maureen Dawson, will be recording questions, and those will be forwarded on to the administration and environmental human services. Okay, so that's the way I plan to operate. And let's go on to introductions. We'll start on my right. We'll take care of the Appropriations Committee on the Auto Horseshoe, and then move inward to Senator Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Roger Cates. I represent Augusta, China, Oakland, Sydney, and Vassar in the State Senate.
Thank you. My name is State Senator Kathy Green. I represent Falmouth, Cumberland, Yarmouth, Gray, part of Westbrook, Cheviot Island, and Long Island in the State Senate.
Good afternoon. I'm Denise Tepler, and I represent all of the town of Topsom in the House of Representatives.
Good afternoon, I'm Brian Hubble, represent House District 135, Bar Harbor, and Mountain Surf, Illinois.
Hello, my name is Eric Jorgensen. Thanks for being here. I represent Portland, District 41.
Aaron Fry, House District 124, that includes part of Bangor and part of Warren.
Good afternoon, I'm
Officer Rocky, and I'm proud to represent the individuals of the Scarborough House District 28.
Good afternoon, I'm Representative Jeff Timberlake, I represent District 75, Turnout, Leeds, and Padua.
I'm Stedman Seeley, I represent the towns of Kennebunk, Ford, and Bitterness.
My name is Tom Windsor, I represent District 71, which has Norway, Waterford, West Paris, and Sweet.
Joe Martin, House District 151, begin Allagash, down 161 through Route 11, end up in Hosp.
Nice and easy. There you go.
Off to a great start. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm State Representative Drew Gatine. I'm the House Chair of the committee, and I represent part of the city of Westbrook.
I'm Eric Brady. I'm the Senate Chairman for the Health and Human Services Committee. I represent the people of Auburn, New Gloucester, Poland, Minot, and Cannock Falls. And our House Chairman, Patricia Hymanson, is not here today.
Okay, folks, the
Yes.
the buttons on these are like touching your phone.
Right.
There's no actual, just heat sensitive there, so.
Dale Deno, House District 45, Cumberland, and part of Gray.
Good afternoon, I'm Jennifer Parker. I represent South Berwick and North Berwick.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul Chase. I represent District 46, which is my hometown of Durham, North Yarmouth, and part of Pownell.
I'm Richard Mallory. I live in Hancock. I represent 8 towns in Hancock County, eastern Hancock County, and the town of Steuben in western Washington County, in addition to 3 villages that are part of Boonesboro and 2 unorganized territories. That's District 136.
Good afternoon, I'm Ann Perry. I'm in District 140, and I represent 8 towns on the eastern part of Washington County, right along the St. Clair River.
Good afternoon, I'm Ben Shipman. I serve as the state senator for most of the city of Portland, including 9 islands and Casco Bay.
Good afternoon, I'm Representative Deb Sanderson. I represent this House District 88, which includes the towns of Chelsea, Whitefield, Jefferson, and part of Middleborough.
Good afternoon, I'm Frances Head. I represent District 117, which are 23 towns and townships in Oxford and Franklin County.
Good afternoon, I'm Scott Hammond. I represent District 32, which is South Portland and Portion Kitchen.
Good afternoon, I'm Representative Colleen Madigan. I represent District 110, which is part of Waterloo and part of
And Jim Hamper is Senate Chair of Appropriations from Oxford. Committee members, in front of you, as I referenced before, we have the charge given to our committees from Legislative Council. That's in the stapled piece. And then if you go to the 3rd page there, you will also see the statute that is referenced in our charge. But with that, an additional sheet that is the withdrawal of the proposal to Bureau of General Services for the usage of property across the river at Riverview. So that I wanted to make sure you all have that information in front of you. Just make sure that you're all fully informed. Okay? I would like to make sure that we try to contain our questions. And I don't want this to turn into a railing against the administration or the Department of Health and Human Services. We've been charged to look at this. Let's not turn it into something that should not be. Representative Gatine, you want to give a few words?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Thank everybody for being here. Very, very happy to be here today. This is my 3rd term in the legislature, and it's the 3rd term that we'll be spending some time talking about how we can really improve the situation at Riverview Hospital and in our mental health system in general. So again, we've been working on Riverview for a long time. This committee, the HHS committee, other committees within the legislature. I'm going to be very brief, because I know I'm really excited to hear what the judge and what the public comment is going to inform us of today. We all want the same thing. Riverview Hospital is a hospital that really is not that old. I think it was opened in 2004. It was the successor to Anaheim. It was representing a really the turning of a page in our mental health system, in a story that's really not, in many respects, a very happy story. And Riverview represents a lot. And we all want the same thing. We want a hospital that we can all be proud of, that provides the best care to some people who are extremely ill, who are there for care. And we want an overall mental health system, whether we're talking about inpatient facilities or community-based services, that allow people to thrive, that allow people to get well, and that allow people to live as independently as possible out in the community. And I think as we approach this conversation today, and anytime we're talking about our mental health system, we're talking about Riverview, I think that needs to be the goal. So, there's been a lot of talk leading up to this, but I think that our goal here today needs to be try to understand the things that we still think we need to understand. I'm not going to get too spun up or in the weeds about what specific proposal is in front of us right now. I do want to understand a little bit more about the need for a step-down facility so that we can fulfill our charge back to the Legislative Council. I don't think we've seen a proposal like this before. We've seen other proposals. We've moved forward with some things that have been brought forward to us, and we haven't moved forward with other things that are brought forward to us. We've made progress, but we need to make more progress. So I'm really looking forward to what we're going to hear today and the opportunity to ask some questions. So thank you, Senator.
Senator Cates, you want to make a statement before we go on?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we have this opportunity for this hearing today and in the light of day to talk about a major proposal for a new institution for mentally ill citizens who are forensic patients. As the state senator from Augusta, with Riverview in my district, I have a particular interest in the subject. Let me suggest that I think as Senator Hamper did and as Representative McKee did, this should have nothing to do with politics. It's really hard to think of an issue that ought to be less partisan than how we humanely and cost-effectively deal with the mentally ill. This is important policy. It shouldn't be the Republican way or the Democratic way. It should be the best way that we arrive at together. And to me, this is all about process. The administration has proposed a 21-bed facility for forensic patients. We all agree it's necessary, I believe. I think most of us agree it belongs here in Augusta. The administration has put forward a skeleton of a proposal. We know what the building will look like, but we don't know much yet about what's going to go on inside. Again, this may be a great proposal, but I think as a matter of the Constitution, it's the legislature that has a role in setting policy, appropriating money, and making major decisions about institutions. And I point to last year when there was a major proposal to significantly transform the correctional facility at Wyndham. It was a good proposal from the administration, but the legislature played a role, and working together with the administration, made some changes to make a good plan even better. That's how it's supposed to work, I think, the legislature and the administration working together. Here, though, up until this point, we've been told that we have no role and that the decision has already been made. But what we think doesn't really go into the result. And some of us respectfully disagree. Again, this may be a great proposal, maybe the best ever, but we are just not doing our jobs if we don't insist that the Health and Human Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee play a role in asking questions, in probing, in making suggestions, and in making appropriate changes. And there are many questions I think we're here today. Why is it 21 beds as opposed to 15 or 25? What are the staffing levels for the facility? What are the admission criteria going to be? What's the population going to be? Why are we talking about privatizing this facility particularly to a for-profit, as opposed to having it just run by the state. What is the authority that the administration even has to build a new facility under the law without legislative approval? Where's the money coming from, and where will it come from in the future? And why now Bangor rather than Augusta? So some of us have been trying to get answers to these questions for months. And I'd just like to say that in the first week of August, the Augusta delegation has been seeking to meet with the administration as well as the mayor and the city manager of Augusta just to learn more and get briefed on these plans, and the departments declined to do so. This has been before the planning board in Augusta, and they did a great job figuring out things like stormwater drainage, a number of parking spaces, but they didn't, nor should they have, inquired really into what's going on inside the building. You know, Bill Belichick tells his team every week, just to individuals, just do your job. And that's what I think we're here to do today. We're going to try to put this puzzle together in the dark, but I'm sure we'll do the best we can to do our job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And with that, I want to bring forward Dan Walton, Courtmaster. Would you prefer to stand or
no?
The seat is good.
I think it's stand to preach, sit to teach.
And please turn on microphone.
Oh, they got a new system.
Oh yeah, we have a new system.
Too complicated. Oh, there.
There we are.
I wondered why some of these old veterans were having trouble with that. Representative Melby, I thought, gosh, he's been here long enough to know how to turn the switch off.
So for those listening, if you would introduce yourself.
Yes, I am Dan Watson, Courtmaster under the anti-consent decree. Live here in Augusta, a constituent of Senator Cates. Senator Hanford, Representative Gatine, and Senator Brakey, and members of the committees. I see some, I won't say old faces, I see some familiar faces. Some are old, but and I see a bunch of new faces. And I'll be around this year, particularly in HHS. I come over a little more often, so I'll see all of you. And hopefully I won't see appropriations too many times, but I might be back. Well, let me quickly begin and give you an introduction and then answer any questions that I can for you. I want to begin by just giving you a quick update on Riverview. And I can report that Riverview in general is improved. The staffing, which has been a problem, my count today is there are 15 vacant positions. 9 of those are nursing vacancies, but that's down from 26. And there's really, I think they're down, so they only have 2 traveling nurses. So that's really they've made a significant progress on that. And it shows up beyond just the staffing reports. The incidents of seclusion, restraint, and psychiatric emergencies are down. And despite the fact that the levels of acuity in the lower 2 units are really pretty high, varies from time to time. But this is not a trouble-free period of time, but they're doing a better job at it. And just my sense is that the staff and morale is better than it has been for some time. So that's the background. That doesn't obviate the necessity for increased capacity for forensics. And I support a new unit within the confines of my authority. I support a new unit because there has been a need for increased capacity for forensics for a long time. And they've done the best that they can to keep up. You may remember that like 8 or 9 months ago, I think they were found in contempt for failure to admit people for incompetence to stand trial. So they've come a long way. When I wrote a report a month or so ago, they were having about, on average, about 9 people waiting for admission, either because they were incompetent to stand trial or for evaluations. And it would run as high as 15. And it was taking like 5 or 6 weeks to get those people in there, which is a long delay. They've reduced that down, and it's currently not that bad, but as I'll explain to you later on, they've reduced it down by really converting EDPC into a forensic unit. There are currently 28 forensic clients at Dorothea Dix, which have been placed there all within this past year, most within the past 3 or 4 months. So the fact that they're, I think yesterday they had one IST, excuse the acronym, one IST and one evaluation waiting, but they had 28, they actually had 30 yesterday, DDPC. So it hasn't gone away, and it isn't likely to go away. This increased forensics started appearing in 2010 and has never let up since then. I wondered whether it was a blip in 2010, and it wasn't. So it's going to continue on. So there is a need for additional capacity, and I'm persuaded that it can be accomplished under the plans of DHHS, and do so in compliance with the consent decree, which is my role here. So I support it, and I understand the sort of awkward stage this is in today, but given your narrow charge, which I think is to make a recommendation to the Legislative Council, I think that's it. I would urge you to make a recommendation and to suggest that they approve it, because I'd like to see DHHS have the opportunity to address which of these positions, which of these locations will best suit the purposes, because in my opinion, there is much to commend the Augusta location, not the least of which is that most, if not all, of the people who will be placed there will come out of Riverview. And in dealing with mental health, nothing is in a straight line. There will be occasions when they will be returning to Riverview. And there will be occasions when there will be necessity for oversight over the entire operation. So I'm not saying that it couldn't work in Bangor. I'm just saying that I'd like to see them have that opportunity. So which one of these really works the best? So turning to the issues that some of which Senator Case mentioned, I have access to DHS files and records. So I have seen a draft of an RFP that would go out to potential bidders for operating with them. You can't really talk about an RFP in detail because everybody's supposed, you understand, everybody's supposed to see that first and not be getting bits and pieces of it in advance to give them an unfair advantage in bidding. So I can't discuss it in detail, but I can discuss it in general. And my purpose in looking at the RFP was this. Does it include the staffing that I think is appropriate and consistent with the consent decree? And does it include the services that are appropriate and consistent with the consent decree? Recognizing, I think, that it would be appropriate to consider some deviation from what would apply in Riverview in light of the fact that you're dealing with 21 people who are more stable, many of whom have been there for many, many years, and don't require the full panoply, but essentially have something that is a reasonable comparison to what Riverview requires, both in terms of staffing and services. And I've seen that and reviewed it, and I've made suggestions to DHHS as to the adjustments that I think might need to be made in staffing, and as to the adjustments and the additions that I think they might need to be made with services. And I haven't been told no, but I just really made them yesterday and today, so it's too early. But we will sit down. And I'm reasonably confident that we can resolve that. Or if we can't resolve it, I'm totally confident that as court master, I have a procedure that can bring it to a resolution quickly, because I can make a recommendation and they either accept my recommendation or go to court within 30 days. So it's that's the way the consent decree works. And that's what I would propose to do. I suspect we'll resolve most of it, but if we don't, and the other thing I might say is that at this point, counsel for the class have not seen the RFP, but they will see it when it becomes public, and we'll sit down. And I have met with them to get their views as to what they were concerned about. And when it becomes public, we will sit down together and we will take into account what their concerns are. And they may be different than mine, probably will be, but in any event, we'll work our way through it. The one issue that has come up and isn't resolved at this point, and I think it's an issue of some importance, is whether or not this would require court approval to transfer or move these clients from Riverview into the new unit. And I think the initial view of the department was that this was a transfer and that it could be done by the commissioner without court approval. And when I say court approval, I mean approval by the superior court whose commitment caused that person to be placed there. And it's my position that it does require that. In my opinion, there are three ways that clients can be moved from Riverview. They can either be transferred to another institution, and I read that as a similar institution, by the commissioner, or they can be released, which means that they're put into a community placement of some sort, or they can be discharged, which is the end of the commitment to the commissioner. The last two require court approval. Only the transfer can be done by the commissioner. In my judgment, this is a release, it's a transfer, if you want to call it that. Two, it isn't exactly a community placement because it's a hybrid, but it is a release and it requires court approval. Why I think that's important is because I think there should be an individualized assessment, an independent assessment by the court that this is an appropriate placement for this person who's going there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be hung up forever in dealing with these issues. They have release and discharge hearings every month or two, usually one day. And really, if they identified the clients that they thought should be released to the new unit, they could schedule the whole group maybe over 1 or 2 days, and it could be accomplished. But I think that there should be that individualized assessment, not only in terms of protection of the public, but also in terms of ensuring that this is an appropriate, that this is the right place for someone to go there. They're going to get the services that they actually require there, and that's what the court does. So that's, as I say, that the department hasn't really said that they disagree with my analysis, and they haven't said they agree with it yet, and I think it will resolve itself. But if it doesn't, then it's very easily resolved by just making a recommendation and going to court, and it'll be, this is strictly a question of interpreting your statute. You folks didn't actually create it, but you're responsible for it at this point.
So you're saying that the actual transfer aspect is saying should be a court appointed, and that is something that is having that instead of just simply transfer from the department, shall I say a department decree, but a court decree, that change would have to be done through the court, or is that done legislatively?
No, it's done through the court.
Done through the court.
Currently, in a simple situation, anytime they want to expand the privileges of someone in Riverview, a forensic client in Riverview, if they want them to go into the community with one-to-one or in groups, whatever, any change they make is called a petition for release. And if they want to place them in a group home, or they want to place them in a PMI, there's a petition for release, which either the department can file, or the Riverview can file, or the client themselves can file. Then the hospital produces an institutional report. That goes to court. The attorney for the client and the attorney for the prosecution who handled the case in the beginning show up and are heard, and the court rules upon it and either approves the release or doesn't. And that's what would happen if my interpretation is correct.
So if the additional facility is constructed, then it's a matter of going through the court to transfer patients from RBC over to the step down.
And the other scenario, if the DHHS's view was carried today that this is a transfer by the commissioner to another institution, that would mean that the commissioner alone would sit down and construct a list of 20 or 15 or whatever and just sign it and say, these clients are transferred to the new forensic unit. I don't think that's what the law requires, but that would be the difference. And I think it's, given what the law does require, I think it's appropriate that there is an individual assessment, not only for the public benefit, but for the benefit of the client as well. So, that's about, as far as I can bring you up to date. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I say, I do, given the narrow charge, I do think that it would be good to put this before them and give them an opportunity.
Reading Representative Teen's body language, he's got a question.
Okay.
If you really read my body language, you know I have more than one question. But it's not a long list, and Judge, I think you've actually covered it. Thank you very much. Judge, you know, as I've thought about this, and I think a lot of us have thought about this a lot, what I'm really trying to do is come up with kind of like a vision, like a mental picture of what this facility looks like, or is going to look like. Because I don't think we have anything exactly like this right now in the state. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, but there are a couple of group homes. I think they're right here in Augusta that are sort of, you know, are sort of step down. They have a step down role for people coming out of Riverview. Let me just put it in that frame. Like, how would this place look different than that, based on what you know now, or are they incredibly similar in terms of the treatment potential and capacity?
Well, I think the comparison would be the one that is in Augusta, the Glenridge, which is the step-down facility for forensics. And Glenridge, my understanding is that even though it isn't totally secure, that there's a staffing that checks people going in and out, so you don't have the freedom to walk in and out anytime you want. My vision of this is this would be a more secure facility than Glenridge. That it would be a locked facility, just as the forensic part of Riverview is. Slightly less staffing, and probably slightly more, well, definitely more treatment provision going on there, and more freedom within the institute, within the building. for people. More privileges, less, because you've taken 15 or 20 people who are very stable. And the problem currently in the upper Saco or lower Saco is that even though you're stable, you're in with 25 others, and there's probably several of those who are not stable. So you lose because you're not in that environment. So I think it would look very much like a unit. This is my vision of it. It would look very much like in a unit of Riverview. More secure than Glenridge, quite secure, probably equal security to the Riverview, and more services than would otherwise be available in the community, but more privileges as well within the
It sounds like based on what you've seen that there's a pretty significant clinical build out within this facility, like clinical team, for nurses and
my understanding of it would be that there would be psychiatric services available in that facility. Yeah. And in my mind, that would be a good thing if you could, an additional psychiatrist for a group of 20 who are on the verge of perhaps being given greater privileges in the community. Particularly if the provider, whether it's the state or anybody else, particularly if that turned out to be a single psychiatrist, that continuity would be good for this population. This is 15 or 20 people who've been there a long time, who are stable, and who could and should be moved on. It would be good when they go to court to have somebody who would work with them, a psychiatrist, who would work with them over a long period of time and has a lot of history with this individual. Because essentially, to get out of that situation, someone has to convince the court that it can be done without harm to anybody else or the client, and that would be a good thing.
Judge, when I read the planning board submission, I think it was pretty specific. It let me say that these would be NCRs that would be going there. And then I've also, though, maybe seen reference to NCRs and others. With respect to the legal status, does it matter, or would there be an expectation that, the doctor will be responsible versus the non-competent trials?
I've been operating on the assumption that it's NCRs only. I've never actually asked anybody in DHHS if that's true, but it seems to me that it has to be true, because the only possibility would be NCRs and persons who've been found incompetent to stand trial, and those are shorter commitments to Riverview, because if you're committed, having been found incompetent to stand trial, unless you're restored to competence, you are found non-restorable after a year or so. And then, if you're really still in terrible shape, what they do is they commit you on the civil side, blue paper you, and you become a civil. So I think it can only be NCRs that would go in here. And I think that if I'm correct that it requires court approval, there would be no occasion for anybody except an NCR to ever be authorized by court approval. I think it's NCR.
Okay, we can clarify that at some point. So Judge, that's one more question now. 21 beds, is that the right number? It's going to take reference in his opening remarks. I mean, sometimes it sounds like maybe, do we need more, do we need less?
I think for this function of housing people who are stable but who still don't have court approval for moving out, I think it's probably close to the right number. We looked at this as long ago as 2004, 2005, and at that time we came up with 14 And we actually, over a period of years, housed them down over the hill where there are a couple of buildings. They were housed there. And then they eventually moved over to Glendale. So that was really the transition. It was 14 at that time. And my own sense, and what I hear at the hospital, my own sense is that there's probably, at Riverview now, there were probably 14 or so that would fit into this category of stable but not ready for release yet. And given the population that is now at DDPC, that those are shorter term folks up there at this point. So I think it's probably within the ballpark of where we should be. And it should cover us for some time. In the future, or maybe even right away, you might make different arrangements for evaluations, which is, it's not really treatment, it's really evaluation. So there might be an occasion sometime to, and they do some of them off-site currently, but that would be,
okay.
I think it's
Sounds right.
close enough for government work as far as I can tell.
First time I've heard that used. Representative Sanderson.
Thank you just for being here today. Glenridge, the patients who are currently utilizing that facility, am I correct in assuming they've already been through the opportunity to engage out in the public as well? They're not still waiting like many of the folks who have not, are still not at hospital level here at Riverview.
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. ISTs, would there be an opportunity for ISTs to utilize that unit if they have stabilized to a certain level of behavior, yet they're still waiting to be considered a civil patient? It may not be stable enough to stand trial.
No, I don't think that would happen, because that decision as to whether they're competent to stand trial and will be tried it fluctuates, but it's relatively a short period of time. It's roughly a year or so within which that is made, that decision is made. So if you were showing improvement, but you really weren't yet competent to stand trial, I think there would be no occasion to put you over there. You'd stay in Riverview until you were either ready to go to trial or you weren't. And sometimes that drags out a little bit. But I think it's NCR only. But
okay. And then just kind of rolling back to the court approval to move to the new unit. Is this not just an extension of Riverview or another mental health institute, whereas the commissioner who has custody of this property can make sure that they're transferred to the most appropriate unit that has to go through the courts? Do they have to do that between units and other areas of service now for these individuals?
They have to do it anytime someone is being moved out of the hospital into another location. Okay. And the way this works is it goes to court with an institutional report. The court approves, for example, they might approve Dan Wathen to be housed in a group home in general. The hospital doesn't have to do that. It's still at their discretion as to whether you're ready for it or not, but you have that approval. So it may take a few months or it may take only a few days, and they will say, okay, you're ready to be placed in a group home, and you're placed, and then you're followed by the outpatient team. And that's typically the way it works.
But that approval usually comes much quicker to change from facility to facility than it does to determine whether an NCR can be determined to go to a facility where they will be, like Glenridge, where they will be.
I'm not sure that I don't know what you mean by
well, I guess what
from facility to facility.
I guess what I'm wondering is if there's court approval between transferring from individuals who have been receiving care at Riverview and no longer need that hospital level of care. And those are the folks who are, we're finding the solution for, and who are essentially taking up the space so we cannot add more critically needy patients into there. All right. What I'm trying to do is, if we can find out, is by seeking that court approval just to put them in another facility, which we understand is the step-down facility to accommodate these very specific patients, is that going to take time? Is that going to slow up the work transfer? Is that going to keep it gummed up, if you will?
Only it will require the initial move will have to have court approval, which I say, you know, if you had a group, you could do them as a group for a period of days. But
okay.
But anytime in the community, if I understand your question, even if, suppose I'm put into a group home, okay, court approval, has to go through court approval. And then if I've done well in the group home, and then I want to go into a supervised or an unsupervised department, it requires court approval.
No, I understand that piece, but you're talking about going from Riverview as of now into a group home that maybe has public access, and you have access to the public. I'm talking about going from Riverview on a closed unit down to the mid unit with a closed unit, no public access.
In my reading of the law, that doesn't make any difference. Okay. It's still a release from Riverview.
Okay.
Representative Madigan.
Thank you, Judge, for coming today. I have a couple questions. One is you had a lot of experience working with concentric folks over the years, and in hospitals, you know, as in Riverview, there are lots of licensing regulations and accreditation type things that speak to what level of staffing and sorts of services are provided. My understanding of a PMI level of licensure that isn't required. I wonder if you have any suggestions on how to maximize what is available to the patients that have earned their need and is looking to solve the issue that we need to get met and make sure we safe.
My understanding of it would be that the professional level would have the same licensure and the same requirements as anyone else. There could be a difference if you read the regulations for a level 4 residential facility, which is what they propose to do this under. When you get down to the level, and I don't mean down in the disparaging, but down in the hierarchy, when you get down to the level, I think they're called direct service providers, and you compare that to mental health workers, there could be some difference in licensure and the training there. And it may or may not be, I suspect that's something that counsel for the plaintiffs might raise at some point. If that's
so you might have some suggestions about how to manage that.
Because this particular regulation talks about direct service providers, and since they're primarily focused on residential, at least it seems to me that it's not quite the same as a mental health worker or acuity specialist and so on and so forth.
That was my concern.
Yeah, I think there is a legitimate question here as to whether are we comparing apples to apples here.
Right, I mean, in light of the concerns that have happened at Riverview before, I want to make sure that patients remain safe, and also staff, that they have enough training, clinical knowledge, and adequate supervision to make sure that the doctor has to do that they can back do.
Yeah, and it will be discussed, I'm sure, and addressed, so one way or another.
Representative Perry. Then I've got Senator Cates and Representative Windsor after that.
This is actually just a quick question, actually. It's still going with the transfer and what's a transfer, what's not a transfer. When I hear you say transfer, I get the sense that you're talking about a transfer from one facility to another where the same level of care is done. And if there is a change in that level of care, that's where the court has to come in.
Well, I think, if I can sort of respond to it, the statute talks in terms of transfer to another institution. It says you are found to be not guilty, the court orders you into the custody of the commissioner for placement in an appropriate institution, which usually turns out to be Riverview. And then it says the commissioner, if he or she transfers that client to another institution, which to me that means of similar type, like DDPC or an institution out of state, then all that is required is that they send a letter to the court notifying that this client is now at DDPC or whatever. That's transferred from an institution to an institution. But if it's moving the client from the institution to anything else, it requires a release or discharge, and it requires court approval under the statute. Now, whether it's down or up or whatever, you could even be transferring somebody into a more secure place. It would still require, in my judgment, court approval.
Senator Cates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Your Honor. You have quite a bit of information for us this afternoon. And apparently you've had a briefing from the department about this plan. Is that right?
I talked with them about the RFP ticket.
Is that this week?
Yes.
And about the security and staffing and the detail of services you talked about in the RFP. Did they tell you anything about the long-term funding plans for this place and how much that might be?
I met with them several months ago about funding, back at the beginning of October. I met with them then, and just had them, because I was reading about this, and I wanted to know where the money was coming from. And what I learned at that time was that the cost of the building was assumed to be approximately in the $3.5 million range, and the cost of a year's operation was presumably $2.650. That's what I learned. Okay. And I received from them information as to where that was coming from, and it was largely the cost of construction largely came from some from Sam's general fund, but some funds, carryover funds that did not lapse. And the ones that I was particularly interested in was, were they using consent decree funds for this? And I learned that they were, but they were taking $500,000 from prior year's consent decree funding that hadn't been used, that had not lapsed. And they contemplated, in the operations side, they contemplated taking a similar amount from future years consent decree funding. And I thought that was appropriate because the consent decree funding was created to provide services to people who don't qualify for Maine care, and none of these people qualify for Maine care. So it wasn't, they weren't taking all of it out of there, which was my initial fear. Wow, I know where that's coming from. But it wasn't.
As I understand, the plan here is to put out a request for proposals for a private entity to operate this facility. Do you know how long a contract the RFP is calling for? We're talking 3 years for some private entity, 5 years, 20 years? Do you know that?
I do not know that. And I think that the draft RFP that I have it has a lot of blanks in it, and dates and things like that, and so I don't know, I can't say for sure.
Just one other question. The decision to privatize this facility is a significant one. Did the department share with you why they thought it was appropriate to privatize this facility as opposed to having it run by the department?
No, I didn't, and that's, under the consent decree, which is the limit of my authority, it really makes no difference. It's performance. It doesn't say state employees or private employers. If they perform, that's all that matters. So I did talk with them about the possibility that there could be some advantages to, at least on the upper end, when you're talking about psychiatric providers. The state, as you know, has a lot of trouble in attracting and retaining psychiatric providers. And it's largely due to the fact that the state line doesn't accommodate, isn't competitive. So they resort to contract in order to get people here. And they contract for short periods of time. There are providers, and these particularly affect the forensic, there are providers who are here for a month, 2 months, something like that. My hope would be, and no one knows, but at least it seems possible to me, that a private firm would be more successful in retaining a psychiatrist for a longer period of time because they're not confined by the state line. So I talked with them about that, and there were ups and downs. And I'm sure if you look at the direct care providers, that you could make the contrary argument. So I think it really isn't my issue, but there are pros and cons.
Thank you.
Representative Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bookmaster, kind of listen to this. I'm not familiar with this type of services that they're talking in detail. I have a layman's knowledge, and that's scary sometimes. So we make assumptions in it. But what I've heard you clearly say is that, or at least I think it's clear, is that we need some sort of interim way of treating people who are not ready to go to the abundant unit and who are housed in a more secure facility. I also hear that we got into trouble a little bit with our Medicaid partners by mixing, or by having people in the hospital setting that shouldn't be in the hospital setting. That we should, as part of our treatment philosophy, we should be moving people into the appropriate settings. I'm kind of interested, I've heard my colleague, the senator from Kennebec, talk a little bit about your privatizing facility, but it seems to me that our care model throughout the state is more privatized than run by the state. We have, it seems to me, we have residential facilities all over the state. My district, for example, 5 or 6. They vary in size from 2 and 3 beds to, I think, 20 beds. And that seems to be the model we've applied. I've been here since the early, when I first came here in 1992. And that was before we built, you were busy closing up a major institution and putting these people out in private housing all over the state. Mostly people who were developmental disabilities. And we did the same thing with Anaheim. When we closed that out, we created a local privately run facilities. And I wonder if you could comment a little bit about that. If you, from your position, is that in a reasonably successful model around the state?
Well, you're correct that every facility, other than the 2 state hospitals, are run by private firms. Every PNMI, every group home, every supportive department, all of the things you can think of are run by private firms. Maine, the department provides no direct services to the mental health community, with the single exception of ICMs, which are primarily in jails, and sort of outreach kind of people. And so you're correct that the entire system, once you get out of the hospital, is a private system. And it, you know, you can look at this institution as just a continuation of the institution, or you can look at it as a sort of a hybrid form of community placement. I think under the law, in terms of court approval and that sort of thing, it's just a question of, if it isn't in the hospital, you've either got to be transferred, discharged, or released. You get to be outside of the hospital.
Yeah, I don't really see that as an operational problem, really. You know, I mean, what I hear you saying is that that's one of the things you do as a court master, or the, you know, or the advocate for the patient himself will normally, when it's appropriate, I would think, or you can anticipate that somebody's going to be ready for placement in a less restricted environment, if you will. I'm sure, particularly what I heard you say is you can go ahead of time and you can ask for permission to transfer this person when it's clinically appropriate. So that doesn't seem to be too complicated in my mind. And it seems to me that what you're really saying is, get on it, folks. You've got a problem around the state with mental health, and we're backing people up in emergency rooms, and we need to have beds for people who truly need services. If we've got a chance to build something, and in fact, I think that's what our mission here today is to say, whether we're going to build a building that we can use to house this population and give them services. And then I believe there's going to be a follow-up RFP to provide the staffing and programming that's involved. So today we should, if we believe as a couple of committees that we should go forth and recommend to our colleagues in the Legislative Council, we should be recommending that they proceed with, or they approve the potential of building a property in the greater Augusta area. And then I think the administration will do what it does in all its other housing programs. We'll figure a way to do it. Or come back to us to ask for additional money or additional authority if they need it. That's my simple way to look at this whole thing.
Representative Temple.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, for being here to answer all these questions this afternoon. As a fairly new member of the committee, I am still struggling with some of the alphabet soup that we use.
Okay.
So you used a term in discussing the funding, the potential funding for the project, Sam's General Fund. Could you explain more clearly what that fund is?
Substance abuse and mental health services, which used to be called mental health or something, I don't know. I've never mastered it myself. It is the Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. Sheldon Wheeler is the director of that office. You'll bump into them several times. But they do have both substance abuse and mental health.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the translation. And the other question I have is, I'm looking at your report dated December 16th, And I see that you have a section discussing the issue of continuity and discontinuity in treatment. And I was wondering if you could outline, you talked a little bit about why you prefer this facility in Augusta, or why you thought you might prefer this facility in Augusta. And I thought maybe you could discuss that in terms of this issue of continuity in treatment.
Well, it may have something to do with continuity, but mostly my thinking is that it's not at all uncommon for people to be transferred into a community placement and then brought back in for a tune-up, and then back out again. And it just seems to make sense to me that this population is coming from Riverview, and they're going to be transferred back in there, and it will relate to continuity of treatment, because you'll be coming back into people who have been treating you for years, and going out to a different place, coming back in. Not everyone will do that back and forth, but there is a fair amount of that in mental. It's not a straight line of progression. Like us, we all have good days and bad days.
All set? Anybody else? Representative Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief, for being with us today. I'm really pleased that you're here because you have provided us a lot of answers to questions that we've asked and we've gotten answers and not received the answers. So I think it's been very helpful. I am curious whether any discussion that you've had with the department focused on the CMS decision to withhold monies at the rate of about $6 million a year, as to what the time period that they suggested to you as to, if we move forward, whether or not they've had any conversation with CMS, whether they would consider restoring our ability to collect federal funds. In the meantime, assuming that we continue to move forward for construction.
I've certainly been involved in discussions where that was mentioned. I've never honed in on it and participated in that, because I figured that's the department's job to get CMS restored, not mine. But I understand, and I've been told, that the removal of people who no longer require hospital level of care is the linchpin. Without that, there is no possibility of recertification. I've been told.
That's really the question I was getting to. Yeah, and so obviously, I think that since I sponsored legislation to build one of those facilities a number of years ago, and the Human Services Committee proceeded to kill the bill. So, and I think that we need to really figure out to move forward on this, and so I think that we need to figure out how to get to that point. One last question. You've answered the question, but I'd like to ask it again, and that's the size. I have always a fear that we build something and it's not very big enough. And if we're going to do 41, should we not consider 50? And I'm just concerned that we build this, and then a year from now, oh, by the way, we're 10 beds short. And I know that you've talked to the department about numbers, and talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't think anyone can predict the growth or shrinkage in the forensic community. So it's kind of hard. I think my way of looking at it is not will there be increased pressure for forensic. I'm sure there will be. But this facility is designed to serve a unique population, people who have been there a long period of time, who are stable, but who have not yet achieved a release from the court. And my own assessment, that number is not likely to grow nearly as fast as the forensic population as a whole. So I think it hasn't changed a lot since 2004 when we looked at it before. There were 12 or 14 people. I think that's probably what there is today. So you may be correct. They may be back. Somebody.
Right. I keep looking at the numbers.
They may be back someday and say, we need more capacity for evaluation, or we need more capacity for incompetence to stand trial. They probably will sometime in the future be back and say, we need more capacity for civil, because we're talking about the forensic data, but every day, there's a waiting list for civil which runs 7, 8, 9 every day. And those are the people he was talking about that spend the time in the emergency room. The forensics tend to spend their time in jail while they're waiting to get in.
That's really the group I'm talking about, because the sheriff has talked to me about we need a place to put them, where do we go?
And the other thing that applies some pressure here is that there are jail transfers also come into forensics, but they're definitely, they come in only if there's space. So they're on the low end of the priority. And so someone who is in jail in very bad shape, very difficult for the sheriffs to handle, they make a request that they be transferred into the hospital, usually for a tune-up, not for be there forever. And those, in the last year, there's always 7 or 8 of those requests pending. In the last year, Riverview was only able to do, I think, 5 of those. They currently have 1 in the hospital. And DDPC, which has just come into the forensic world in the last year, I think they currently have 3 in the hospital. They're not in the hospital. Yes, 3 in the hospital that are jail transfers. And that is, if you're looking at the entire forensic population, you got to consider ISTs, incompetent to stand trial. I'm giving you the acronym there. Okay. NCR, not criminally responsible, and the jail transfers. And that is the.
Thank you.
Representative Tinley? Or was it Surratt? Surratt. I may follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Judge Watson. I appreciated your overview on the RFP portion of your presentation here. And I just want to clarify that it is illegal under current Maine law to disclose the details of RFPs. So that's why you have to be vague with the information you give out. Is that right?
I believe that. I can't say that I've read the statute, but I believe that they don't want people telling, oh, I've seen the RFP and I know what's in it, and because that gives an unfair advantage.
That's my understanding, that it's not legal to do that.
Yeah.
I had a question about the tune-ups. Can the tune-ups only take place at Riverview?
Well, it's sort of like your car. It depends on what sort of tune-up is required. Typically, these are not minor tune-ups.
I'm just thinking of when you have Psychiatric Hospital in Bangor, Dorothy Dix. Is there, are we limited to only?
No, I mean, it's possible that it could be there, but typically a Riverview, someone who has been released from Riverview, placed in the community, they will be followed by the outpatient services of Riverview. And if they're in need of coming back in, they come back in. And they were the kind of client, when they were decompensated, who required that security, so they're brought back in. So they typically would not be taken to a community hospital because they present risk that community hospital is not designed to deal with.
I was just thinking that if the step-down unit was in Bangor as opposed to Augusta, that there would be another option in the Bangor region. Because it seemed to me that you were more comfortable with, your first choice would be to have a step-down unit in Augusta on the Riverview campus.
I don't think there's anything except for the fact that most of the people who would be there would come from Riverview. That's the only reason I think that it could work. It could work in Bangor.
So there's some flexibility.
There is some flexibility.
And then I had a question about the cost per day at Riverview. Do you have an idea of how much it would cost each day to have a person at Riverview? It seems like that these are individuals that are getting a very high level of care or access to high level of care. They don't need that high level. And we have reports from various hospitals that you have some individuals that really need to be seen, and we need to free up those beds because they're not being treated the way they should be. And so it's a cost.
Yeah, there is, I think the cost today is something on the order of $1,300. But it's largely fixed costs, you know, it's not the cost of the building, the cost of the staff, but it's $1,300. And I usually describe it as, you know, this is a very expensive tool that we have that is in short supply, and we should use it as most efficiently as we can. So when someone is in Riverview and no longer needs to be there, we should do everything we can to put them into another location. The same thing occurs on the civil side. The people get ready, they can be moved out, but they haven't got a placement. So how many days are you going to waste, you know, trying to find them a placement? Because you're tying up a very valuable asset in this hospital, the tertiary care. So yeah, it should be. And it can be done in a way, I think that I've spoken to some of the clients currently at Riverview who might be affected by this. You may hear from someone today. I think there's some fair degree of apprehension on their part as to just what is this, just like many of you folks have. But I think I'm not capable of saying, well, it's going to be fine, but I'm just saying I think it could very well be seen as an appropriate step-down facility, giving them more privileges than they currently have, because they're deserving of more privileges, and once they're in a secure setting, that could be it could be as simple as having television in their rooms and that sort of thing. And privileges that they don't currently get.
Makes sense. Thank you.
For those who haven't done the math, the $1,300 a day is just shy of $500,000 a year. Representative Timberlake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I think what I've gathered out of what you got this afternoon and that you said is that there is a definite need for this facility. And the plan that you still looked at the RFP at this point in time would be something that you would probably be satisfied with. And it's probably
it can be worked, given the consent decree mechanism, it could be worked into something that would be acceptable.
Okay. And the other part that we have a little talk about is whether it should be in Bangor or Augusta, which I have no heartburn one way or the other where it ends up. Because the truth be known, it is not really going to make a difference whether we got to transport this patient an hour north or an hour south at the time, because the way bureaucracy works, it takes us an hour or two to do the paperwork anyway. And by the time we get them there, we get the paperwork done. So I don't see that as the biggest problem in this whole picture. But do you see that as a really big stumbling block, or really down deep that's not going to make a big difference?
No, my consent decree it makes no difference one way or the other. As a practical matter, if you said to me, Dan, which would be the most convenient location, I would say, well, I think it makes sense to put it next to the mothership, and that's where it's going to be. It should be there. But it could very easily be in Bangor. As you say, there'd be some travel, but it probably isn't the biggest thing in the world, the travel that's involved.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Honor, would you see any advantages to a Bangor location?
Not offhand, I don't see any advantages. I think the 15, initial 15 clients, or whatever, 21, whatever it is, will be Riverview clients. And Riverview has far more experience in dealing with the institutional reports and the presentation to court than DDPC. I don't know that DDPC has done many of those, if any, because they've only recently started taking ordinances. But I think it's.
So you don't see any advantage, right?
No, I don't really. The other thing to think of is that, and this is a disadvantage, most, when you're looking for placements, I better be careful. I was going to say most of the placements are in the south. They're easier to find in the south than they are in the north. But that's not true. There's some around Holden and up in that area that where there are placements. So if you were talking about getting people out of there, out of this unit, there very well could be. There's 2 or 3 placements up there that take people who are harder to place.
Thank you.
I've exhausted the list of questions. Anybody else? This thing going once, going twice. Thank you, Quartermaster.
Thank you.
Appreciate you informing us. And very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Ann, do we have anybody else on the list? I mean, I've got a list here of about 8, and I assume you've got a revised version. And so public comment period, when you go up to the mic, would appreciate you, if you're with an organization, naturally telling me your name, your town, organization you're with, okay? And as I said earlier, I would appreciate you being concise in your statements. So with that, Don Bushane, I'll bring you up first. Have a seat, microphone's already on.
Good afternoon. My name is Donald O'Shane. I'm a forensic patient on the Upper Stockholm unit at the Riverview Psychiatric Center. Before I explain why I'm here, I would like to quote from an article from the January 3rd Kennebec Journal. Quote, legislators are already moving ahead quickly, but this proposal needs a public vetting that includes input from the people it will most affect. Refusing to work openly with stakeholders makes it seem like the department has something to hide. This is not an approach that will solve the crisis at Riverview, unquote. When the first notice of this new facility hit the newspapers, there was mention of razor wire around Hartford. This raised all kinds of red flags with the patients on Upper Stockholm. Jail or psychiatric facility. Even though we know the razor wire is gone, the fact that it was there in the first place is still in our minds. Add to that all the conflicting stories in the newspapers about the location of the facility, denial of permission, new possible location in Bangor, and in the same article of January the 3rd already quoted from the statement which reads, quote, now the DHHS says that it is moving ahead with its plans, which neither the public nor the legislature has been able to question to build the facility. Instead, the department has developed a secret plan to hire an outside firm, possibly a private prison company, to come in and run this new facility. All kinds of red flags there. A private prison company? You all should have a letter with all kinds of questions, and so far, nobody can answer any of them. But the facility will still be built without the answers. That is like putting the cart before the horse. That is why there is so much concern amongst the very people this place is supposed to be for. What we don't understand is how the facility can be built when there are so many legitimate questions about it that nobody seems to have answers to. I'm here to ask that we, the patients this new facility will be dealing with, be included in discussions pertaining to the new facility. It would be even better if you decide on who will be running the facility so that person could be on the ground floor of discussions and be able to answer the questions you have before you. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Questions from Mr. Beauchene? We have Representative Team.
So thank you for coming today. So your written testimony, which you didn't read, thank you, but we will read.
I was told I only have 3 minutes.
No, I appreciate it.
I couldn't read that whole thing in 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. So there's a list of questions that you think they're pretty specific. We'd like us to try to get answers to these questions.
When we ask questions, we are told nobody has the answer, that it will be up to whoever is running the facility to answer the questions. I mean, simple question like, will we be able to have a television set in our room like we do now? To be determined. Can we have a computer game? To be determined. I mean, you have simple questions like there will be a laundry facility there so we can do laundry? Don't know. And there's so many things that deal with the new facility. Will there be an on-site medical doctor? I mean, we need to know these things. Will there be on-site peer support, advocates? We have these things now. And if we are going to be moving into a new facility, we would like to be sure that these things are in place for us to help us along the way. If I haven't seen the blueprint, I could probably answer some of my own questions by seeing the blueprint and see what's available on the blueprint. But it's like I wrote in that letter with Riverview. There were things that were not considered prior to the building of Riverview that had to be changed once we moved in. The phones. There's 2 phones on each unit so the patients can make and receive phone calls. However, they were out in the open, and anybody walking by could hear what was being said. The consent decree requires privacy for phone conversations with attorneys and clergy and stuff. So, after grievances were filed, Riverview had to build a phone booth to the door on each unit to comply with the consent decree. There are other situations in that letter that you have.
Thank you. And it just really, for clarification, looks like there's about 15 people that signed this.
They all agree with what is written there.
Are they all current patients over at the hospital?
They are on my unit.
On your unit.
This is not me speaking. Before that letter was written, I spoke to the clients and asked for their input on their concerns, their fears, their needs, and that's all included in those letters. And that's why they signed them. They agree with everything that's on there.
Well, thank you for coming over today and sharing this with us. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Brady.
I just, in some of the documents, as I've been reviewing these as we've been going along, I see on the, we have something, the memo to the Legislative Council, there appears to be some blueprints and floor plans. I wonder if that's something that could be made available.
I've never seen a blueprint.
Well, yeah, I'm not suggesting you would have had access to it or not. I'm just saying maybe it's something we can make available to you and that might be helpful.
That would be very helpful, because nobody so far has been able to answer any of the questions, and the blueprint would be a partial answer. And then I could show that to the other clients in the unit.
And of course, I think this was for the plans for, floor plan for the Augusta proposal. If it's in Bangor, I don't know if it would be different or how it would be different or not, but maybe that's something we can see if we can get into your hands.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. Next up.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Simone. explain to, and I know you've been before us before, and I'm not going to ruin the last name. Miss Molina?
Fallon.
Fallon.
The E throws off, sorry.
I try.
Good afternoon, Senator Hamper, Brady, Representative Deteen, and starting Representative Hines is not here, and all the members of Appropriations and Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Simone Mallon. I live in Winthrop, and I am the Executive Director of the Consumer Counsel System in Maine. I am here on behalf of the Council to testify for or against the new facility being proposed at Riverview or Bangor. Especially for those of you that are new, that don't know who the council is, we are a public instrumentality that was enacted by the legislature to advise all of you, the state, and a myriad of other folks about issues for consumers of mental health services, for us to have a voice in public policy and systems development. I myself am a consumer of mental health services as well. We have spent much time in the last few years with all of you and with the state on a myriad of issues regarding Riverview Psychiatric Center. We absolutely want to be part of the solution for the multiple issues going on inside Riverview. At the same time, we can't address Riverview in isolation from the community mental health system and resources there, because they're not separate issues. Before we discuss building a new facility, we think there should be an important step that needs to happen. I don't know if the department's willing to spend half of, they've said it would be half of their $1,300 a day, which in my math is $219,000 per person a year. Have they addressed the court to see if that kind of money or less would allow people to move into the community without even going to this facility? It has happened in the past that patients have been denied access to the community based on the lack of services in the community, a PMI provider, capacity to take clients, the outpatient team being in disarray. I did put one article that mentioned that on my testimony. But first and foremost, people should be allowed to move into the community of their choice if at all possible. And I really hope that we would try that solution. If we're willing to give that amount of money to support patients, let's try community first before we build another institution for them. And for those that maybe the court will not allow even with that kinds of funds, hopefully we could build an even smaller facility for those folks that don't need that. I want to say too, and Dawn didn't say it, and I'm really glad that Dawn came over. I want people to remember these are patients' homes. Most of them have lived there for many years and some for decades. And when you think about how you'd want to live and how you'd want your family members to live, think about this. I don't think about this as an institution. I think about it as someone's home. And how would we want to live? Or how would we want our family members to live in the community? And I'm concerned because we haven't seen anything come out from the department, not for lack of asking, not for lack of asking to support that work. We have consumers with a lot of expertise in helping hospitals design new facilities. I gave you a copy of our letter asking the department to be part of the solution and the planning. It's been left unanswered. We want patients to have the most opportunity for recovery and rehabilitation in the community. And how can we best support that? After last session's idea of putting patients in Warren and then the planning board's first out the gate plan of razor wire leaves the council with significant concern, given that we haven't seen anything. So we're not opposed to it, but I certainly don't want to support something I haven't seen, nor would the consumer community. And again, we want to be part of the solution to that. And without having a myriad of stakeholders who have expertise in those things, I can't imagine the department at this point has the expertise to understand what it's like to be a patient inside there, and what they might need, or the clinical expertise. I don't know that they have it. And you know, there have been lots of times in our history where I think most often we involve stakeholders in making decisions and helping inform making plans and processes that really will support people to be successful in the community. And that's what we want to see. Thank you.
Representative Temple. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I just have a quick question. Your organization is new to me, so I'd love to know about the statutory creation of your organization and the responsibilities that were outlined in the statutory creation.
So our organization actually started prior to our being enacted into law. It started with the consent decree plan of 2006, and a group of stakeholders, consumer stakeholders, met for a year and a half to develop how could we truly have consumer input where there has not historically been in making decisions about policy or changing systems or where to spend money. The consumer community has often not had a seat at the table, and that was really the foundation of building the council. We then decided to put in and ask for a bill with Senator Brannigan, Representative Brannigan at that time, sponsored that bill, and it was enacted by Governor Paul LePage. And so our work is really a charge of, we have councils all over the state. We have 9 currently, in capacity for more, and we're always working on that to get consumer input at the local level. And then they elect their representatives that sit on our statewide council, and they act as our board of directors. And it's completely consumer driven.
Senator Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for joining us. Nice to meet you. As a member of the committee that, in sort of loose terms, watches the pennies for the state and the legislature, my hunch is that the money that we're going to be spending on this facility is substantial. And I think if we had resources that we could use more effectively at the beginning of mental illness with early detection, screening, things that we know that are evidence-based and research-based that can help folks not only live more healthy and productive lives, but also can save money down the road with reduced hospitalizations, reduced jail time, reduced forensic, that sort of thing. Would your organization be interested in working on that and how to come up with suggestions on how our mental health resources are allocated?
Absolutely. If you ask us, we'll be here. Certainly, if you look at peer support, it's one of the most cost-effective resources in the country, in the world, and we use it here in Maine. So there are certainly a lot of things that we could be supporting that are much less costly and less traumatic than hospitalizations in facilities.
And much like, heart disease or diabetes, mental illness is serious and chronic, but there are treatments, and if we have good access to treatment and good other interventions in place, people will be less sick.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, most people who know me now don't know that there was a time when I had 10 hospitalizations in 2.5 years, and people said I would never work again. I was on Social Security and Maine Care. So I sit here before you saying, yes, recovery is possible. I live it every day. And there are millions of people that can and do.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Most of us here, some of us have a lot of expertise, but most of us don't have a lot of expertise in mental health treatment. We just heard the court master come in and support the proposal for a step-down facility. From what you've said, it sounds like you and your organization would be a little ambivalent about whether that's the best use of state dollars. Do you and does your organization have input with the special master and with the court master and with the consent decree process?
We certainly do spend time with Dan, and he is a great ally of ours. He was probably one of the biggest proponents of the council's existence. Dan actually has a lot more access to information than we do. Not for lack of requesting, but you know, the fact that he's been able to see a draft of the RFP, I think he's the only person in the state right now that can say that. And so we certainly are ambivalent because one, I think we should always try to build less facilities and support people in the community if at all possible. And then, you know, what does it look like? I guess that's the hardest part. We have supported the hospital getting recertified, and if this is a portion, let's create a home for folks. We have the two before. And how do we help people be successful in the community? And not knowing what this would look like, I'm certainly not going to say we're going to support it until we see something, to know that it's going to be a best practice, recovery-based, you know, as much rehabilitation possible so that people can go out to the community. Until we see anything, that's where we're ambivalent.
Representative Sanderson.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Good you too again. I'm no longer in your district, I'm sorry.
Oh, all right, I'm going to ask you a question that's probably going to sound a little odd, but please take it in spirit, which is today. Obviously, Judge Lawton has been an absolute tireless advocate for consumers and making sure that the services in place are services that are robust as can possibly be and appropriate. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Okay, here's my next question. It's going to be a little bit weird. Do you trust it?
I do.
And he believes this is a necessary and good project.
I'm not saying it's not a necessary or good project. And again, Dan has had access to information we haven't. So I do trust him, but I certainly can't say to the membership of the consumer community, I've seen something and I approve of it. I trust Dan, but I also haven't seen anything myself. So it's just not good practice for me to say, or our organization to say we support something we haven't seen.
But does it give you a level of comfort knowing that he has been privy to this inside information, although we cannot share it at this point? Because the RFP hasn't been released. Because I would hope that it would give you and other consumers that specific level of comfort knowing that he has always had your back and always had the welfare of consumers with mental health services and those suffering from mental health. For first and foremost in his mind. And then just one other point that I would like to make. In your testimony, you talk about the $600 a day that's going to be spent now for individuals who will be utilizing this new facility. And maybe that $600 a day would be better spent in the community. Right now we're spending $1,200 to $1,300 a day on these very same individuals. That would free up $600 a day, which maybe we could put toward other service-based.
I absolutely agree that that's money not well spent.
Yeah.
But what I say is before somebody is just default to a facility, if has anyone approached the court and asked if those resources were put towards services for somebody, extra supports that they may not exist currently? Would the court approve them living in the community? I don't know that that step has happened with those kinds of resources. And so that's why I'm not saying one or the other.
You do understand that we're only talking about the patients who are not elevated to a hospital level of care. They do not no longer need a hospital level of care, yet have not been approved by the courts to go out into those group homes.
Absolutely.
Those are the ones that we're talking about.
But sometimes the court has not approved people to go into communities because the services don't exist in the community for them to leave. But they are clinically ready to go. And what I'm saying is, have we first tried to make sure those resources are available for someone to successfully already go into the community before we put them in a facility that we haven't tried with the court first yet? I agree there's probably going to be a group that won't. Yep. There's a group that the court won't approve no matter what. And so for them, a small facility, but have we tried everything humanly possible for folks to go into the community? And when I know that there are patients who haven't been able to go into the community because the community resources aren't available, then to me that says first we need to try to do our best to do that.
Yeah.
And then last resort, not necessarily.
I think we have two very strong needs on this side. Thank you. You're welcome.
Seeing no other movement on both committees, thank you. And Bertram?
If I think, just push the chair that way. My name is Ann Bertram. I'm from Portland. I'm a citizen, and I'm also a consumer of this services. Senator Hepper, Senator Brakey, Representative Gassine, Representative Hyman here, and distinguished members of Appropriations and Health and Human Services Committee. I'd like to preface my comments by saying that we're all in this together. I've always been under the impression that if a person was adjudicated guilty by mental defect, their sentence was confinement to a psychiatric hospital until restored or cured, or for a longer indefinite stay to be determined by psychiatric staff. I'm not aware of a status which requires further curtailment of liberty beyond needing hospital-level care. The people we are talking about today are well enough to not require hospital-level care, but have curiously qualified for an extension of confinement in a secure level 4 private non-medical institution, which until recently was surrounded by razor wire. Was this additional stay in a secure PNMI upon their diagnosis of restored or cured and court approval, an arrangement built into their sentencing determinations at trial? One may argue, however, that these individuals are not cured. They merely do not qualify for hospital-level care. The state of Maine has existing PNMIs in a number of Maine communities, with $219,000 a year for health care for each individual. Why are those resources being assigned to another secured environment, which essentially resembles a jail? Most forensic experts would agree that the safest way to return someone to society from a maximum security hospital is with increments of decreasing structure and increasing freedom. These people have already been incapacitated. I'm willing to bet that there are some jurists with some serious due process and equal protection concerns on their minds, and my knowledge of retroactive decisions and ex post facto law regarding sentencing is remedial at best, but I'm also willing to bet what appears to be additional time added at the end of a judicially imposed sentence is somewhat sketchy as well. There is no information as to the groundwork of this project. Operations, goals, staffing, qualifying criteria, lengths of stay, client expectations via the program, and standards remain book industry. The only thing I've heard for sure is that there's a $600 a day, $219,000 per year cost per client. With agony of mind, I will add that this wouldn't be the state of Maine if there wasn't this tug of war between stakeholders. Anyway, to secure the success of this pending project, let's offer people the opportunity to grow in communities they choose, and let's not build in a city that has no supportive infrastructure. All to avoid legislative guidance, because in Maine we seem, at least according to my observation, to support surreptitious vote changes, employing grossly unqualified entities because they are the lowest bidder, extending legally imposed sentences because that is how we treat the poor and most needy of our community, or flat out deny patient rights, which, by the way, might already have been addressed by consent decree. We need to remember that we don't live in a society where zero risk is possible. We need to remember that the term insanity is not a legal term, is a legal term and not a medical term. Once an individual is determined not to be insane, it is the not guilty part that applies. I'll proffer some goals I think worthy of this project. Take the extra $1 million that's been proposed for the Bangor development and add it to the current project. Instead of having a new facility, have a new state-of-the-art facility. Provide an appropriate level of treatment to this unique group of citizens. Alleviate pressures currently experienced at the state's emergency rooms, county jails, and prisons. Employ those services proven successful to this specific group of people via everybody's best term right now, the buzz phrase, best practices. And attract a group of providers to a state-of-the-art facility with a state-of-the-art program. Demonstrate the state's commitment to moral and ethical architecture while creating this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions at all? Not seeing any. Thank you again. Maine Hospital Association.
Good afternoon, Senator Hamper, Representative Cmtes, Senator Brakey, members of the committees. My name is Jeff Austin. I'm here on behalf of the Maine Hospital Association. And our organization has taken a position in support of the facility. We don't have a bill before us. This is a little awkward, I think, for all of us. So to make sure we're on the same page, we're in support of the facility as we understand that it was proposed to the Augusta Planning Board. We don't have additional information such as Judge Watson has. But to the extent it is known as a level 4 residential care facility or PNMI, 21 bed, secured to some degree beyond normal PNMI, our members are comfortable saying that we think you should support its construction. Our role in this is, as you've heard, is that our members include the 2 private psychiatric hospitals in the state, the 7 community hospitals that are licensed to have psychiatric units and psychiatric beds, and then all the other community hospitals with emergency rooms. We generally don't have direct contact with the NCR community, although it does happen. As Judge Watson said, our general interest here is in seeing the beds at Riverview be available for the civil population. And to the extent they are unavailable because they're occupied by forensic patients, there is a backup in the system. And that backup can have not only impacts on the operations of the hospitals, but the experience of your constituents as they go to the emergency room or they wait for services. Why are we comfortable supporting when there are so many reasonable and understandable questions yet to be answered? I think that's a fair question. And I don't want our support at this stage with unanswered questions to be misinterpreted in any way as meaning that those questions are unimportant or that the answers don't matter. But as we review the list of questions, and we don't have a comprehensive list, and our opinion could change, no matter what the answer is, we typically get to a position of, please still build it. Whether it is publicly operated or privately operated. That matters. That's a legitimate question. It's important. Either way, I think we're going to be supportive. Whether it's in Augusta or Bangor. That matters a lot if you're living there. Where's my home? Can my family come and see me as they have? That matters a lot. But either way, as other providers in the system, we're going to be supportive of either location. Does this secure Riverview recertification? I don't know. I don't know that you can get an answer to that question out of CMS. But even if Riverview was fully certified today and this situation existed, we would support the construction of this facility. So I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want our members to be misunderstood. We don't have information you don't have. I do think some of our members in particular do have some experience both operating PMIs and interacting with them on a daily basis that led them to the conclusion that this should provide an opportunity for a therapeutic environment. Like many of you, we were supportive of the concept, but non-committal for a long time because we didn't know what it was. We knew it wasn't supposed to be a correctional facility. We knew it wasn't supposed to be a hospital. So the question we kept asking was, well, if it's a prison, there's a rule book, we know what it is. And if it's a hospital, there's a rule book and we know what it is. Before the Augusta Planning Board declaration that this was a level 4 residential care facility, we didn't know what the rule book was either. And so we were non-committal. But because of our members' experience with that, we believe it provides an opportunity. I think the questions that have been asked are very valid to whether or not the opportunity to present to these individuals a therapeutic environment actually materializes. We don't know. We've got to see the staffing, we've got to see all that stuff. But the regulatory structure, we believe, around the facility provides that opportunity, and more than that, provides that expectation. It's what should be going on. Just another couple of quick points. We proposed a sister facility to this last year and advocated for it vociferously, and some of you supported it for not the criminally involved population, but the geriatric population with significant psychiatric diagnosis. We have a limited number of beds in the state for the geriatric population that does not belong in a nursing home. Principal diagnosis of psychosis or psychiatric diagnosis present dangers to staff and other residents. We think we need more of those beds. This is not a very different facility than that. You may need one for adolescents. I have greatly enjoyed Simone's assistance in helping me understand these issues from a different perspective. And oftentimes, the dance she and I do is not so much, we don't often adopt her position of either or, but both and. One of the principal questions our members have about the facility that cannot be answered today is a variant on what Representative Martin asked. Is this enough? The variant is not the number of beds, but the question our members ask is, what's going to be the average length of stay? Because that's another way of getting at, is the facility big enough? And if the average length of stay is 1 month, there will be turnover, there will be flow through, and it will work. Otherwise, it may just be a one-time relief, and if they feel for decades, we still support it, but it might not be optimized. In my opinion, Simone's point about community resources is how you optimize this facility. How do you get that flow through at this facility? She's absolutely right. It isn't the diagnosis that will necessarily determine. It's the diagnosis plus what's available to support at the various point in time. So it may be a factor in your deliberation of this, maybe not so much this facility, but what are we doing to make sure this facility will be optimized by allowing people to flow through, by providing community integration, community support so they can, and the rest of the system can keep moving through, which is where our principal concern is. We offer written testimony to the Legislative Council. My members sense, and I want to impress upon you the urgency with which they experience this. The week of that meeting, we asked the facility, one of our members that has a psychiatric unit, how is it going? 6 patients waiting for Riverview. To be clear, those are requests. Sometimes the staff at Riverview says that our request is inappropriate and they don't meet the medical necessity standard. 5 patients on involuntary commitment. 1 patient committing significant harm to staff. 1 patient committing significant and immediate harm to self. This is an urgency. I hope it's not blinding us to questions that should be asked. I don't think it is. Most of the questions, as you answer them, I think we're still going to get supporting yes. Financing is one of them. We had that question as well. We don't know how it's financed. You could probably trip me up and say, well, if it's financed by entirely cutting hospital reimbursement, yes. We would still support the project. We would just have concerns with that misguided financing. So we're here to help. We don't have additional information. I don't personally have expertise on level 4 residential care facilities. But we're hopeful it is the therapeutic environment that provides these individuals the right care at the right time and in the right setting. So we have to answer any questions.
Okay, I've got Sanderson, Melody, Jorgensen, and Kings.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Good to see you. What's your average length of stay on people who present with mental illness in the hospitals and they're stuck there? You cannot move them because there is no.
I don't have that data point. To be clear, most of our hospitals are not licensed to provide inpatient psychiatric care. That's a special license. I think it's 7 of our community hospitals that have units where they're licensed to provide that care, and then the 2 private psychiatric hospitals, Acadia and Bangor, and Spring Harbor Hospital. But it can't, for patients who need to go somewhere else, it can be a long time. It's point in time, it's patient specific. I can try to get an answer, but I'll provide you a copy of the written testimony that we provided to the Legislative Council. One patient was on a 45-day involuntary hold, one was on a 2 or 3 were on a 60-day, one was on a 90-day.
How's the hospital getting paid for that?
The inpatient psychiatric reimbursement system is complicated.
Some of these are starting
but sometimes you get the competition, sometimes you don't. It depends on if the payer is in place. It's generally not great.
I mean, I can see a backlog on both the front end, the hospitals getting into the appropriate treatment in mental health facilities. And that's a big backlog, as the one is speaking to. On the other end, is the community-based services as well. But we do have that very piece that's also broken. And this is a solution to fix it. I know, the question that we have today is, do we or don't we build a facility? The facility is going to be built. And the question really for us today is, does these committees recommend to the council that, we'll head to Augusta, because of that capital project statute that's ultimately the department has the choice between Augusta or Bangor, and they will build in Bangor if all else fails, and they may still build in Bangor, even given the approval on the Ledge Council piece. But for our own information, I would love it if you would be able to provide some of that information, the average length of stay, because this is not the only time you're going to be having this conversation regarding patients who present in our hospitals with mental health issues, and what the average cost of the hospital is situation, because obviously they pay very well, but all for them. And I think that would just be good information for us to have.
Absolutely.
No rush.
Representative Melody.
Chair, thank you, Jeff. And Jeff, thank you for your comments about supporting us regardless. And clearly it is a piece. It is perhaps not the answer, but it is a piece of the puzzle that we certainly need to address. Thank you, Simone, for your comments about giving me replacement. But I had a question. I think you don't have a mail in front of you that you sent out probably back in September for candidates. I think you would call for it. Well, probably everyone here got it. And you made a statement that I found somewhat astounding, in that you said that Maine, in terms of per capita mental health spending, spends 3 times the national average.
I think that's a Kaiser Foundation stat.
Okay, so it wasn't worth it.
No, we didn't do anything.
And do you know what year that was? Do you know what the amount was?
They tend to lag, but we can pull it up.
It was 2013, and the amount was $129, and the per capita national average was
And that number is skewed, but nonetheless true. It's skewed because we, unlike some states, we've adopted the Samson model and brought in substance abuse and mental. Not all states have done so. So that number is somewhat skewed, and I had to, I thought that was a telling figure, and I found it stunning in light, especially in light of some of the numbers that we're discussing here today. It scares people how much we spend. And results we do not get.
I think there are other SKUs in there as well.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, but I thank you nonetheless for saying that. I'll leave it at that. I thank you for your position on this issue because I think it's critical.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks very much, Jeff. Good to see you again. I guess the question I have, you brought up one of the central questions here. I mean, this whole business of whether this is a correctional facility with mental health elements added in, or whether it's a mental health care facility with security added on. I think that's one of the most important questions. And I think you've clearly come down to the side of, you want it to be a healthcare facility. And I think that seems like the right approach for it. Do you think that in your experience here that this is likely to be something that there are organizations that have the capacity to, if this truly is something that the governor seems to want to do this as a privatized thing, would there be organizations in the state who might be able to come in and likely bid on this? Obviously, you haven't seen the RFP, you don't know that, but I mean, do you think the talent exists in the state to actually do this?
I haven't seen the RFP. Any of our members have seen the RFP. It's very hard. Well, it depends on which town you're talking about, but at the highest credentialed psychiatric, it's hard to find that level of professional services in Maine, particularly the middle rural you get. It's hard to say. Because of the need, I would be hesitant I would cast it as wide a net as possible. I wouldn't want an RFP to fail because somebody who had the ability to take a track record, even if they were out of state, wasn't given an opportunity by some construction RFP. So, if someone has the ability to bring in more talent into the state of Maine that otherwise doesn't exist out of the it's possible organizations in the state do a lot of great work, and depending on the construction of the RFP and the reimbursement rates and all that, as none of us have seen, it's possible. But if the positions are undefined and the reimbursement is unclear, you're not sure what you can attract based on the RFP amount. So it's kind of different.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, thanks for being here, and thanks for adding to the list of questions that we really ought to have answers to. I think everybody agrees that this is a facility which is needed. One thing I wanted to ask you about was, I understand the pressures that are on hospitals with emergency rooms being backed up and this pipeline being clogged because of the crowding of the Riverview. But it's my understanding from speaking to Judge Walton, from speaking to the department, which is at least double hearsay, and those freed up 21 beds at Riverview with this new facility is built will be filled not with civil patients, but with forensic patients. Is that your understanding?
What happens to the Riverview beds that get liberated by potential transfer of those forensic patients? I don't believe that they're dedicated to a forensic use. If there is that level of forensic need, then we better use it for that need.
Well, but that's not going to help you with your opinion.
Well, it depends on where they are now. If they are all in jails, not directly.
But that's an important question, which we ought to get into.
Well, if there is a demand for the beds, this is an important question, but it's going to lead me every path I go down to a yes. If there is an immediate need for 21 forensic beds in Riverview, then I think you should try to build this, even if it doesn't provide any members' help. it is not dedicated exclusively to the forensic population, it can be used first come, first served priority, however they want to do it, then I think we would say, great, build either way. Important question, but
If you were sitting here as a question you'd want me to do, is that
I don't presume to do your job. My shoes keep leading down the path, yes, but I respect it.
Representative Bennett?
Thank you, Mr. Austin. I'm going to ask you very similar one I asked as well, which is about the reason I think that you brought up that there's not a lot of expertise in providing mental health care, particularly in mental health in the rural areas. And so my question is, do you have any suggestions regarding facilities such as that that will be licensed or analyzed?
You mean what the job description should be?
Well, because I also have concerns about the level of expertise required to work with this population for staff and issues to say, and it sounds like the members of your organization have had some opinions about that.
So, I could answer it this way. If we were to establish a facility, what would our members be looking for to say this facility?
Sure, if you want to
What
put it that
we-
way, yeah, go ahead.
I'll try to answer it.
Okay, thank you.
And Representative Swarby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Austin. I have a question about the shortage of psychiatrists here in the state. My understanding is that we don't have any child psychiatrists in the Bangor. Is that true?
It was a data point I heard a couple of years ago, and I think it may still be true.
Can you elaborate a little bit on why we're having such a hard time attracting psychiatrists to come to Maine? Is this a nationwide problem, or?
I would love to go into a question that I must answer. It's just hard to attract, I think, a lot of professional level, because you're not only recruiting a physician, you're recruiting a family, often this house has a separate profession that they would like to continue. It's just challenging. Highly compensated, highly educated workforces in rural places in the state. The demand can be irregular, being a practice moments irregular. So we're just challenges associated with your child psychiatry beginning with the Medicaid population, persons there in rural areas. Most of many of the kids in rural areas are Medicaid babies and half babies that come from the it's just a lot of
Any others? Representative Taylor?
Thank you, Jeff. I'm not going to ask you to dive into this today, but I think maybe you can provide this information. You said something earlier in your testimony about questions that you might have had about what this facility looked like, and then when you heard finally at some point in this process that it was a level 4 residential care or level 4 PMI, that might have crystallized it for you. I had the same experience. When I heard that, I pulled down those regs, and I read them. And to be honest, I actually they kind of raised more questions than they answered for me in some respects. So if you have members with that experience who when I read those regulations, they don't scream out at me, secure psychiatric facility. They're to me they're more, sort of assisted living facilities that we see throughout our communities, taking care of the elderly facilities. Again, I'd love to, if you or some of your members have some information about why you think that's appropriate, that would be great. I would probably pose that question to the department also.
And I'll try to get an answer to that, but I have a similar reaction. I'm not very familiar with the regs. So on a question like what is the admission policy, I think that was asked.
Yeah.
I think the regs require an admission policy.
Yeah.
I think the regs dictate what the admission policy should be. Because I think it changes from population to population and situation to situation. So if you want a question, if you want an answer to the question, what is the admission policy? The regs don't tell you. But but that there must be an acceptable admission policy is required. So it's, because there has to be one, because it's a licensed regulated facility, we get lean on it. That way, I guess we presume this facility would get leaned on to have one. But it is an assumption, maybe it won't be that well defined, but it's assuming it will be acceptable admission policy.
Maybe a combination of the regulations and seeing the detail that will eventually release an RFP.
And are you ready to go forward on going?
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, appreciate it. Patrick Eisenhardt. All day. Thank you, Senator Gabriel. The first, and the microphone is strong enough to pick you up anyway, so thank you very much. Thank you. Senator Hanford, Senator Katz, Representative King, thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I'd also like to thank all the members who were on the DLA committee last session, which supported the Veterans Initiative we had. You were very kind to us, and speaking on behalf of the veterans, thank you very much. My name is Patrick Eisenhardt. I live at 49 Eaton Road in Augusta. I also want to apologize for my parents. My driveway was sheer ice, and I also apologize for my fabulous banging this as quickly as I could to get it done, so please forgive me.
Nobody's complaining.
I'm a retired Coast Guard commander. Prior to Coast Guard, I served as a non-commissioned officer as a jump master and infantryman with the 101st Airborne in the early 60s. In my retirement, I've been a small businessman. I've been the commander of this county's American Legion and also local close to the American Legion post. I'm here today not to speak as an American Legionnaire, but to speak as, first of all, a human being, second of all, a veteran, and third, as a taxpayer. I hold a master's degree in vocational rehabilitation with a specialty in work evaluation at the University of Wisconsin, where I served my internship at the Eau Claire Mental Hospital in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And as I listen to the testimony today, it reminds me a lot of some of the situations that occurred at that mental hospital, namely staff shortage, lack of community service, and worse, the institutionalization of patients. Patients that got so comfortable they didn't want to leave, and as a result, they had an overcrowding position. I liken this situation to a clogged artery, a clogged vein with a blood clot. You can treat that in a number of different ways. One, you can go to the emergency room, have them do open heart surgery, you take the clot out, less, with what we call it, is that or blockbuster? Or you can do it with medicine, with prescription drugs. Okay? There are different levels of care. At that hospital, at that time, in the United States, the number of psychiatrists was 1 to 5,000 patients. The staff shortages there resulted in nurses, aides, and janitors doing therapy, and the only people that those folks got to talk to. I'm not saying that's true here in Augusta. But all of that isn't followed here. In this state, the consent decree says that we should have seven regionalizations. If you read the October 6th, the judge can probably correct me on this, 2016 consent decree plan of care, it says that there should be regional consumer groups inputting into whatever plan of care comes out. And I haven't heard from them today. I'm not sure, maybe I have, but I don't that lady.
Yes, that's us.
That's you, okay. So it's surprising. The decree mandates that they have input into any of the changes in the delivery system. So I come here today as a veteran, fellow human being, and a taxpayer, being asked that you demand a feasibility study and investigation into the
Department of Human Services' overall management, especially as it relates to the proposal to create a for-profit forensic unit in Bangor to avoid legislative approval and taxpayer oversight. A proposal which the state attorney general has told us that it's illegal. Those included in my presentation, during my 30 years of military service, I put my life on the line to keep every man, woman, and child in this country safe. And that includes the mentally ill. And as I said, I have no affiliation, nor a family member have any affiliation. I'm here strictly as a veteran, human being, taxpayer. So I include those. The mental health patients this year that I read about being tased, handcuffed, jailed. That sounds more like a POW camp to me than a hospital. I think we got to do something about this, and that's why I'm here. Many of these folks, as the judge pointed out, have to have court decrees to move from hospital to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. The current proposal says that we're going to move this forensic unit up to Bangor. Well, my cursory understanding of the Patient Bill of Rights, the federal Bill of Rights says that care should be provided closest to home. And I'm just wondering what that patient that's in Augusta winds up in Bangor with friends and relatives, family can't come to visit. That's part of the therapeutic process. I believe most of us try to treat others as we would be treated. Even the Geneva Convention believes in that principle. Such treatment does not come close to the Department of Human Services October 13, 2016 consent decree plan approved by the feds, the governor, state, and legislature. According to the plan, the DHS is required to encourage, and I quote, encourage consumer voice and an integral part of the mental health system. Apparently, the current DHS sees no need for any consumer input according to media reports. Newspaper quote, Peter Steele LePage's director of communications said the administration settled on the Bangor location as a way to avoid legislative approval and oversight of his plan for a new psychiatric facility. As a taxpayer, I have my representatives, and all of you are my spokesmen. Should be. You have a right to demand oversight. You have a right, anytime we have money, I don't understand where this money just comes out of here. 3 million here, we have $500,000 from Andrews and all that. Where does that all come to? Where does it come from? Out of the air? I don't get it as a taxpayer. I ask, where does the voice of the consumer public come in? Where does their voice come in? Those are the people that are receiving the service. Those are the people that have first-hand knowledge of what's needed. Those are the people that can tell you what the status quo is if you want to know. Secondly, the plan calls for, I quote, implementing a system of managing behavioral health care. Under the current DHS administration, $20 million in federal funds have been lost, not because of building deficiencies, but due to program management deficiencies. Neither the governor nor the DHS director had any direct mental health experience, and yet they have this secret proposal to provide direct care that none of us know anything about. They don't have the training. Our DHS director has no direct mental health care or any other kind of direct health care that I'm aware of. So how can they conceive of a plan and expect the rest of us to buy into it? The lack of managerial and professional experience perhaps has best been manifest by the revolving door of hospital administrators over there. Direct service staff have been shorthanded and forced to work overtime. Their raises have been delayed or not at all. And the thing that gets me is I've asked the different folks out there, staff, what do you think about all of this? They're frightened. They're frightened to express and tell us what's going on out there. That's scary. Direct service staff have been short-handed, underpaid, forced to work overtime. What do you expect if not for patient care? No men like the doctor, cardiologist. We don't have a cardiologist make a diagnosis as to whether it should be one of those things that you talk about or medicine. We've got folks at the top that don't know anything about the subject at hand. And worse yet, those that do, we can't hire them because they don't pay enough, or the morale's so poor they don't want to come. Rather than accepting responsibility for the loss of accreditation of $20 million in DHS in federal funding, the DHS Commissioner, Merit Mayhew, appealed the decision. In 2014, her appeal was rejected, citing concerns about existing compliance. During the current DHS administration, there appears to be a clear and willful effort to be less than transparent with Maine citizens and our representatives, quote, in compliance with the consensus of the plan, create a reliable information system that provides accurate, timely data to guide the decision-making process as to what is taking place in the state of hospital. That's a mandate by that consensus plan, that thing that we all approve individually. So you go have this forensic unit up wherever you want to put it. You don't know what the quality of care is going to be. One thing you do know is the people at the top proposing this idea don't have the necessary required training to implement it. Legislators, you guys were not even made aware or approval sought when the August 2014 sign outside the state hospital was replaced and featured a new name, the Riverview Psychiatric Recovery Center. Though the legal name of the facility remains as it is. At least, you're going to name it. You ought to be something. Forgive me for being a little bit, this hits my soul. I'm reading this stuff, I'm thinking, those people at that hospital need somebody to stand up. Somebody with no vested interest. So here I am. In 2004, and talking about the question is, well, if you're going to build this facility, we don't have any information on it. You know, this MHHC said, well, we got to build it whatever it takes. Well, we did that back in 2004. A 92-bed civil forensic psychiatric treatment facility was built to replace the old state hospital. If all we have to offer the mentally ill is hospitalization, and you're institutionalizing those people, then you're going to be needing more and more and more warehouses. In 2007, a state investigation revealed that many potential patients were turned away. At that time, a report to the state legislature reported that the vast majority had other places to go for help. 30 of those patients ended up in emergency rooms. Anytime you start talking about institutionalization, you don't fix that clock, you're wasting taxpayers' money, and worse, you're wasting humanity. As of August 2012, the center has had 57 forensic patients and 35 civil patients, meaning that some forensic patients are occupying beds on the civil side of the hospital. The center has also recently put many forensic units nearby group homes, resulting in a petition with 150 signatures, this is in Augusta, calling for their closure by neighbors with safety concerns. We've got to educate people about mental health. When I worked in Eau Claire Mental Hospital, we had staff people that were crazier than people that were being patients. I'm not kidding. And if you could give people, any one of you, $600 a day to establish a group home for people in transition, we'd have all kinds of group homes, wouldn't we? But instead what we've been doing is cutting back the unit costs on those group homes. And this money, the SAM money, I just read in the newspaper that we had to close one. The drug treatment, we have an epidemic going on in drugs, and we're closing group homes for the addicts. So I believe, like this lady said, We ought to start at the least expensive, most appropriate level of care before we ever get to an institution. And unless we can answer that question and say that we've done that, we shouldn't be building new hospitals. Okay? It's a mandate of that forensic plan that we all bought into, that we have a continuum of care. Out in Augusta, we have acreage out there. Acreage that's costing the taxpayers of Augusta money because we can't share the tax burden of the state. We have, I think it's 2 Cape Cod houses out there. We have a multiple apartment place. I would suggest to you that rather than slowing up the process with a court order to send somebody to the group home, we have a continuum of care starting out with people that are immobile and need severe hospitalization. Gradually move them through case management, counseling, into one of those Cape Cod homes that maybe we share by a group of people, and maybe try to get some job placement for them, to work out of there while they're still attached to the hospital, and then discharge them. And that plan of care should start the day that person's admitted with an eye toward discharge. I'll conclude my remarks here very shortly. So that would speed up the process. It would cut the costs. It would do the very thing that the consumers are asking you to do, okay? And using a facility that's in place. And the other thing is, by farming it out to profiteers, you have no assurance that you're going to have license or the ability to oversee quality of care. People don't want to be taken from Augusta, or live in Augusta, or live in southern Maine and be transported up to Bangor. So at $1,300 a day, I would suggest that rather than spend that money for a pig in a poke, that you consider spending maybe $200 a day, open up another group home. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Sanders.
Brian, I appreciate it.
See you too. And I have to see you after sometime about
Okay. I don't really have any specific questions to ask you on Mike. I do have several things about your testimony that I would love to sit down and talk with you about. I believe your email is still the same as I've had all along.
It is.
Would you mind if I contacted you and we set up a time to discuss some of your testimony, because there's a lot to discuss.
You're very happy to.
All right, thank you. Good to see you.
See you. Anybody else?
Good to go. Thank you. Public citizen John Letting. Former state senator, but I thought I'd give you a couple of sentences. Did you ever serve in this committee?
Yeah. I've served on most of the committees as senator, but I've never served on this committee, so sorry. There won't be any homemade apple pie.
And this wasn't really a public hearing.
Senator Camper, Senator Brakey, Representative Bettine, and other distinguished members of both committees. My name is John Nutting. I'm a private citizen from Leeds. I also am a member of the Riverview Human Rights Citizen Committee that meets once a month right in Riverview. But I have to emphasize that I'm here today as a private citizen speaking. Since 2010, we've seen a huge increase at the hospital in the number of defense attorneys that are asking for the 6 months NCR evaluations before their cases can proceed. And I'm disappointed to say almost 100% judges automatically saying, yes, 6 months Riverview. And I'll elaborate on it, point it to a little later. I support construction of this unit, but these forensic people with lived experience, which is the way we refer to folks, they are not clients or consumers, it's people with lived experience. Many of them, most of them have been in Riverview for a long time. This move, any move, is a tremendous, huge source of stress to them. And if it is not done smoothly, and if the stress level gets too high, this will fail. Okay? And to me, if they all have had a long-term relationship with current staff at Riverview, and if some of these same staff can be used at this new facility, nothing will lower their stress more than that and make this more successful. The first thing they may get to do is to go to McDonald's for an hour and get something to eat. A little thing like that is a huge source of stress that has to be done successfully before something else is tried. 4 or 5 people going shopping somewhere for an hour. That's another, slowly working them back into the community. If they can do this with staff that they've known for years, this really, to me, increases the chance of this facility's success. Most of these folks are on a lifetime court order to stay compliant with their treatment plan, and so that assures that they will be confident to do these new levels of freedom and eventually work themselves back into a contributing member of society. And some will fail and need to go back to Riverview. And if they're using the same staff, again, you just increase your chances of success with this facility. Now, the current director of Riverview, I have a huge amount of confidence in. I have been very impressed with this individual. Staff issues are being resolved. Morale is up. Use of restraints, use of solitary confinement is down. Staff training in resolving conflicts without the use of violent things is up, and so that's all good. And I believe by the time this new facility would be finished construction in Augusta, that we can have more staff hired so we can use some of the same staff to assure this success. I want to close with one thing that I don't think the 21 beds is big enough because maybe a little something different, and if I'm here today, I wanted to throw this before you anyway. I mentioned earlier about the huge increase since 2010 in defense attorneys asking for an evaluation of the Riverview before the client's trial can proceed. And there have been people in the past that have been ordered to be evaluated at Riverview by a judge who are not mentally ill. Judges are very smart people, but they're not trained mental health professionals. And all it takes is 1 or 2 people who are just plain criminals and who are not mentally ill that can really disrupt the whole hospital and cause staff to be injured and other consumers to be injured and headlines to be drawn because of that. Really all we can do now is to charge them with yet another crime and move them into a jail situation to get them out of Riverview. And that's not a good situation. Now, what New Hampshire does, and to me, what a piece of this facility could do, I've been very impressed with New Hampshire. When a judge orders somebody to be evaluated before a trial can start in New Hampshire, you're sent to a separate evaluation facility, and they take a month to 6 weeks, and they determine if you are mentally ill or not. If you are mentally ill, you're transferred to the state hospital. But if you're not, you're transferred to the
state. And as Sarah Figney mentioned before, we do represent the acuity specialists, nurses, support staff, the 1 doctor at Riverview, the psychiatrist, the dietetics, and social workers and others at both psychiatric hospitals. I first want to thank the legislators who were here the last session because you invested in Riverview. You invested and funded the requests that the administration came forward with. You added positions. A lot of public debate about those positions and what they should be. But at the end of the day, more positions were added. And important from our perspective, you raised the pay. and for certain job classifications. And I think that stabilized the facility. I believe that's what Chief Justice Wathen would say, to your credit, that did help stabilize the facility, help with recruitment and retention. I would just want to give you a little bit of history because I personally have been around a long time and have seen many debates about mental health services, hospitals, and the community. And they're always robust. They're always public. They're always transparent. I heard Helen Bailey's name evoked a short while ago. I remember sitting in these rooms hearing her passion and being able to have the conversation, debate, argue. Doesn't matter who the administration was. To get the facts out. And Riverview, and I know those of you, Representative Martin and Senator Cates, because you are from Augusta, may remember the robust conversations within the community, among providers, among stakeholders, among advocates, as to what Riverview should look like. And I'm glad we're starting that type of conversation again today in regards to this facility, because that only will lead to transparency, allows us to be accountable to everybody, because it's also the taxpayers' money in question here when you build a facility. I have to circle back to something Senator Cates said. In my history, my decades around the State House, I don't remember any governor ever building anything without some type of permission, authority, budgeting authority, public hearings. No matter what the function of the facility is, no governor, no executive branch has ever simply stepped out and built anything without your approval in a budget document or through a public hearing. And if there is something I'm missing, I must have missed it because I don't recall that. That is certainly your authority and both the policymakers and those who determine the budget. I don't have much more to say other than to add about the public versus private debate. I have no idea why the department landed on private versus public. Something that the Chief Justice said earlier is that this really could look like a unit of Riverview. So it only makes sense on the surface of having it be a public facility and have the continuity from the people who already work and provide services 24/7 to this population and know them well. I will say that in a recent labor management meeting with the department, we have a standing labor management committee that works with the Department of Health and Human Services. We asked the question, why public versus private? And the answer was the state has never provided these services, hence public, hence private. That's why they wanted to privatize it. Unfortunately, nobody on the committee knew the history, which I believe Chief Justice referenced, that at one point on the grounds of the AMI campus, there were several group homes that were a version of a step-down unit. Certainly not that what may be imagined today, but was certainly a version of that, and that was up through 2012. So, as well as this is a population that our members, the folks who work in the facility, know well. And finally, when I heard the comment about perhaps it's easier to attract psychiatrists in the private sector, because that is a struggle with Riverview. I will say that there are psychiatrists on staff at Dorothea Dix, and have at least been there, not just a few years, but I know of a neighbor of mine who's a psychiatrist at Dorothea Dix, who's been there since 2005. So they have been able to recruit and retain psychiatrists, and they always have. So I think something could be learned about why that happens there and doesn't happen. I know psychiatry is a challenge no matter where you are in Maine, the rural nature of Maine, and attracting psychiatrists in general are challenging, but perhaps we can look to Dorothea Dix and see how did they do it and why that can't be replicated here. I have no further comments or observations, but really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. Senator Rennie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does your group or have any opinion about this notion that maybe this sort of a large facility is not the best way to go, and maybe the same resources or maybe even fewer might be able to be redirected into community-based step-down sorts of things?
frankly, no, I don't think we can make an opinion on that. Just, it brought back a memory during the whole Riverview debate. We were asked by members, by the community, will you weigh in on the side of how many beds? Should be more beds. Should be less beds? That's not our expertise. So I hesitate to, I won't weigh in on that.
Thank you very much. Same question I asked Sarah. Point of view of Augusta versus Bangor.
Excuse me?
What's your point of view with respect to building this facility if it's built in Augusta versus Bangor?
You know, at first blush, you know, Augusta if the population is in Riverview and moving to this facility on first blush, it would make sense to have the facility on the AMHI campus. I will say I am biased towards Dorothea Dix and the services they provide, and I'm certain that they could provide the same services. Plus, they have psychiatrists on staff. So I think the first, you know, Augusta is, you know, the most logical step, but we really no opposition to Dorothea Dix and Bangor.
But it's not clear that there's going to be any affiliation. Again, this is, I guess, an open question I have, and I just want to make sure. I'm going to ask it in case you have a different information than I do. There's no indication that we've gotten that this facility, if it's built in Bangor, is going to be any way affiliated with Dorothea Dix. Is that correct?
Correct. You're right. There is no, you know, the only comment I think the governor made at one point, not about Dorothea Dix, but Riverview, about the staff going back and forth. He said that in a comment when he was talking about AMHI campus, Riverview. And that we didn't know what does that mean. Was there going to be, and that's an important question, wherever it's built, is there going to be a relationship between the state psychiatric hospital? What's the interaction? What's the interplay? Is there any overlap? Is there any continuity? To your point, thank you for raising that theory. It's not clear.
Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we've got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Candy Cleaves is last on the list.
I apologize for not having anything for you in writing. I just sat there and written it. Senator Hamburg, Brakey, and Representative Katina, esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Appropriations and Health and Human Services. I'm Candy Cleaves of Garland. I'm here today as a taxpayer and as a Region 3 rep for the Greater Bangor Area Consumer Council System of Maine. In other words, I'm a peer in the mental health community. Our director, Simone Allen, was asked if she trusts Judge Wadham. She said yes. So do I. However, he's not a peer. While he fights for us, he's not one of us. The CCSM was created to bring consumer voices forward in regard to policies. Why not allow Simone to do her job? The CCSM is also mandated in funding as well. And so rather than wasting our taxpayer dollars, why not let the council do its job? I can assure you that if Simone is made privy to the same information as Judge Watham, she would keep it confidential. Having been elected as a representative for 6.5 years, not once will she spill the beans on anything that we want to know that she's been told not to. Pretty good with that one. If there's further concerns and that information that we're not aware of, she can speak for our community. We have had faith in her, and we have chosen her. Throughout our different councils across the state, anybody is welcome to come and join in those councils. Only peers can make the votes. And through those votes, we come back to the statewide. And at the statewide level, we chose our director. We have chose consistently to have faith in Simone. So she is our voice to the community for peers. And while never prior to today had I met the veteran who stood before you just a bit ago, I can tell you that today he became one of my heroes above and beyond his previous service to our country. He clearly is still holding true to the oath to protect us. As the wife of a soldier who is a peer as well, I want to remind you that our peers come from all walks of life. And sadly, this includes active military and veterans. It includes our parents, our grandparents, our children, our leaders, even those like yourselves. our friends and neighbors, there should only be one objective, and that's to treat people in a manner that will most help get them mentally as well as possible. As a taxpayer, I want to see parties come together on this issue. And I expect each of you to do what is necessary to protect our peers. And I expect that as our representatives, you will hold the governor and DHHS accountable and insist that they allow the peer community through the Consumer Council system in Maine to be a full partner in this process. And I'd like to remind you that President Reagan years ago started the process for this deinstitutionalization. It didn't work out real well, but maybe the voices of peers had been listened to back then, we wouldn't be here today. The idea behind it is a wonderful one. Moving back to putting people into institutions, that's not the direction that this wonderful country should go. I have had the opportunity to work at the Idaho State School Mental Health Hospital not long after deinstitutionalization. I saw the things that went on there. Being a peer, I have a whole different realm of what I get to know, part of it firsthand and part of it from my peers. But I'm also a victim of somebody who has become a forensic patient after he murdered my uncle. He needed help. Shoving him into a prison system of people who were not his peers doesn't make somebody accountable later on when they are to get out, and especially people who are not, they have been found not guilty of the crime because of their mental health state. Putting barbed wire around a facility, that's not the way to go, and thankfully that's been taken off the table. Bringing in people who, or possibly bringing in people who have worked in the prison system, that's not the way to go. These are things that, yes, make our community scared that it's going to be a prison. It might not be what you're voting it to be, but that's what it would become. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Questions, either committee? Thank you. At this stage, I promised you we would get into posing questions for Mary and John, but a lot of committee members have not taken the opportunity to get, particularly a bathroom break. It is, as I read the clock on the wall, it is 4:48. I want to give us 5. That's 4:53. We're going to go back on, and we're going to go into the question portion to get more read. So let's take 5, an official 5, and come back in. Okay, thank you. Committee members, take a seat, please. All right, we back into order here. During some discussions with my co-chair during the 5-minute break, which I didn't get out of the room, it may be a more concise process to have you formulate questions instead of us sitting here in the room and banging out questions verbally, getting them to Maureen, let's say by noon tomorrow, and let her compile the list. She can sort and organize the questions. And with that, if there's no objection to that, I don't think anybody wants to delay this thing another hour or better tonight. With that, I still feel we have a charge from Legislative Council to report back. And the wording of the letter is not specific as in both committees together as one report back to Ledge Council. I'm going to interpret what I read here as, go ahead, Health and Human Services, you guys gather and deal with your letter and recommendation to Ledge Council, and AFA will do the same thing. So with posing questions to the administration and Department of Health and Human Services, we really need to set a deadline. There was no deadline set in the letter in front of you from Ledge Council as far as the report back or the recommendations. But I really feel like we need to establish a deadline for that also. And I know that Ledge Council is scheduled a meeting at the end of the month. And so I'm just wondering whether or not putting a deadline for the committees to formulate their recommendation of Wednesday the 18th. AFA members, I'm expecting supplemental budget tomorrow. And my co-chair and I have already started talking about when we're going to start public hearings on that. And that potential is the 17th of this month to get moving on that supplemental so we can jump into a biennial, because my guess is we're going to have a lot of public hearings. So AFA members, we got our work cut out for us. We don't have time at all. If we set a deadline for report back to Ledge Council, we also need to set a deadline in our questions to the department and the administration. Am I correct? Correct. Am I out of my mind thinking a week from tomorrow? Yes? Is the answer?
No, sorry. I didn't have my mic on, so whatever I said was not official. So, I mean, to me, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think we need to seek a quick turnaround time. And again, if we can get our questions to the administration tomorrow, by early in the day tomorrow or noon, and with the goal of trying to get those questions out of the administration by the end of the day. Maureen, is that possible? And give the department a week? Yeah. I mean, I think you need to get an aggressive deadline or timetable. I think that doesn't sound pretty aggressive, but appropriate timetable.
Senator Brady.
So I'm at a disadvantage. My co-chairman isn't here, but I think that sounds fine to me, and unless I see any objection from members of my committee, I think we should be able to abide by that same timeline.
And we in appropriations, yes, Maureen.
Just to clarify, the letter to the governor with the list of questions, that will be jointly both committees.
Yes.
With a deadline asking for a response from the departments
by the 13th.
By the 13th.
Which is what, next Friday, right?
And then once we get those responses, the two committees work, and you're hoping to set a deadline for each of us separately to get back to the Legislative Council by when?
By the 18th.
By the 18th. Thank you.
Wednesday the 18th. Get letters out by the 18th, or on the 18th. Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
What's the register?
Okay. But,
well, unrelated to that, that's right. But it's my understanding that some of the members of the committee this morning were given an opportunity to meet Mary Mayhew at her office. I wonder if that invitation can be made available for those of us who were not invited to you.
I'm sorry, I missed part of that.
Yeah, I've been told that some members of the committee went and met with Mary did.
Correct.
And I wonder if that same offer could be made to the rest of us who were not invited this morning.
Go ahead, Senator Gates.
I know the hour's late, and I had a visceral negative reaction to that Representative Martin. If they're willing to talk to us, they can come out here and talk to us. So that we can hear.
I understand, but if in fact she doesn't want to talk publicly, I have no problems in going down and meet with her to talk about it. I agree with you, Senator. I mean, in a democracy, and we are supposed to be open, but for some reason that's not going to happen. At least we can get information that we can then feel more comfortable with. So I don't know.
Do you want a formal request from the department? I'm sure members of DHHS are listening to us now, and
Right.
that request has already been submitted.
Exactly.
Do you want to do that formal? Do you want?
Well, I don't need to be formal about it. I think that if people were invited today, which I know some of you, because this place is like a sitter, that some people went. We were never contacted as to whether we'd want to go. I know that I would want to go, and I think the other members of the Democratic side of the aisle would be interested in going. And Senator Cates. And I think if, I mean, that's it. It's that simple, really.
Yeah. We'll go on the assumption that the request has been made, and I'll follow up on that. So, Senator Brady.
I was just informed by our analyst, Anna, for members of the Health and Human Services Committee. If you have questions to submit, if you get them to her or to Mary Ann by noon tomorrow. I'm sorry.
We're interchangeable.
My apologies there.
Yeah, no, that's a good recommendation. Yeah. So, one more.
If we're wrapping up, it sounds like we are. We got this, we also got this memo a few moments ago that was prepared by the ACLU that was more of a legal memo about the authority. What is the committee members think? Is there anything follow-up that you think you know on that? Representative Fry, their thoughts or?
Yeah, I had a chance to read it. I for one would like to at least ask the Attorney General about that office, just respecting on his work. I think we'd like to do it for that.
Yeah, I'd like to join the dissenter in that. I think it'd be good to hear from our state attorney about what it is the legal authority is for the administration to do without the legislature's consent. So I joined Senator Case in that request.
Representative Tepler, you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would also like to join Representative Case.
Okay, Senator. All right. Had enough?
Good night.
For today? Okay, good. I thank you all for your cooperation and your attentiveness, and we will close.